Released in 2016, Deadbolt is an action game where the player adopts the role of a Reaper, a hitman that is sent on contracts to kill undead creatures like zombies, vampires, and skeletons. As they do so, they begin to discover that the monsters of the world they inhabit are cooperating together towards a common goal. And it's only when the player discovers and listens to collectible cassette tapes that they uncover how far the undead conspiracy reaches and what the true motivation is behind it. Let's go through the Reaper's Journey and the information they collect along the way to see if we can put together the full picture. Deadbolt takes place in a location referred to only as the Place. It's a plane of existence of perpetual night that lies between the living world, where mortals dwell, and the underworld, where, after traveling down the river Styx, which is guarded by the ferryman Charon, the souls of mortals go when they die. Unlike those that live in the mortal world or the underworld, who are either living or dead respectively, those that live in the Place are undead, mortals who have died, but due to specific circumstances surrounding their death, have their souls trapped in a body that still lives on. In order for these creatures to end their miserable undead existence, their souls need to be guided to the afterlife, a job that falls on entities referred to as Reapers, who, with their mastery of the variety of weapons found in the Place, violently destroy the bodies of the undead in order to collect their souls and help them towards the afterlife. In addition to their combat prowess, Reapers also have the ability to travel through the ventilation and sewage systems of buildings to outflank, confuse, and surprise their targets. A power that is activated by a small, innocuous lighter wielded by the being. Reapers don't just wander the streets committing wanton murder, however, as they operate more like hitmen for a mysterious entity known as the Flames. After gathering information from its spy network, which is made up of beings called Candles, the Flames sends Reapers to eliminate specific targets to keep the undead population in check. As of late, the Candles have noticed that the Zombie Kings, a ragtag gang of zombies, have started to congregate, so the Flames sends the Reaper of Deadbolt to start thinning out their numbers. During one of these early missions, the Reaper finds a cassette tape dropped by one of the zombies which reveals these creatures are created when a mortal overdoses on drugs. And despite it leading to their death, the zombified version of that person can't help but to continue their hard drug use when they come to this place, thereby falling into a cycle of overdose and reanimation. The cassette also contains references to a zombie named Roland and something called Ash. When the Reaper makes it back to the Flames, they learn that Ash is a new drug that is being sold and used by the Zombie Kings. According to the Candles, when used by the undead, it makes them feel alive again. The Flames wants the Reaper to find out more about this drug, so sends them to break up one of the gang's drug dens, whereupon they come across another cassette tape. Upon listening to this one, they hear one of the zombies explain the feeling Ash gives them firsthand, how it makes them remember what the vigor and vitality of life was like. It's a feeling that makes their undead existence more tolerable, and the euphoria of that feeling is what makes Ash so addicting to the creatures. Roland is also mentioned again, and apparently, he's asking the Zombie Kings to resist the temptation of using Ash because they need it to leave soon. Obviously sensing an ulterior motive for the use of Ash, the Flames sends the Reaper on several missions to disrupt the Zombie Kings' operations. They destroy their drug caches, kill a dealer named Puff, who calls Roland in a panic when the Reaper arrives, clear out a pound where they were training hellhounds, and get revenge for a Candle that's been killed by the group. All of these activities against the gang make the zombies paranoid, and the Reaper notices them consolidate a lot of their forces to a nearby motel. Recognizing they must be guarding something, the Reaper clears out the motel and finds information that points them to the warehouse where the zombies are housing all of their ash. They go to the location to destroy the ash, and when they arrive, they find that vampires from the 1,000-Year Royals are also present, and are apparently giving the zombies orders, indicating the two factions are working together. Suddenly, it's clear where the zombies are getting the ash, meaning the Reaper will need to investigate the vampires to understand where the drug is coming from, as well as what it's going to be used for. However, the zombie kings still need to be dealt with, so after the Reaper clears out the warehouse of undead and ash cash alike, they are sent to Roland, the leader of the zombie kings, to eliminate him and force the collapse of the gang. Despite the large number of guards posted all around the building, despite having fierce firepower, despite knowing the Reaper is coming to get him, Roland is no match for the powers of the Reaper, and is summarily executed by the being. As he meets his demise, he drops a cassette tape, which reveals his motivations for getting the zombie kings involved in the plan with the vampires. Roland saw himself as a leader for the zombies, and wanted to take the gang away to a place where they wouldn't need to use ash to take away the awful, miserable feeling of being undead anymore. They would just be in a place where they would feel alive. So when the vampires came to him saying that the Dredged, a group of undead made up exclusively of skeletons, had a plan to do just that, he bought in rather quickly. He had two things to do in order to make sure that the plan was going to work. He and the zombie kings had to hold on to and guard the ash as best as they could, and continuously send their members to die at the Reaper's hands. That last point was obviously a big ask for someone that saw themselves as a savior to the zombies. So, to help ease the pain of what they were asking Roland to do, the vampires sweetened the deal by offering perks to him, like letting him be with one of their own, a vampire named Amber. While Roland and the zombies were an important part of the plan, they weren't important enough to know the exact details of why they were to do these things. That information stayed with the vampires. The cassette tape comes to an end as Roland gets a call from Puff, likely the moment the Reaper showed up to kill the dealer. The information on the tape, combined with the vampires he saw in the Zombie King's hideout, leads the Reaper to conclude that the ash trade is linked to a larger undead plot that runs deeper than previously thought. And to learn more about what the undead plan to do, they'll need to investigate the vampires. Vampires are tall undead that are formed when a mortal suffers a betrayal from a former lover. They have an innate beauty about them, which they use to regularly seduce other vampires and undead, making them, by far, the most promiscuous of the various creatures in the place. There's lots of nightclubs in the place, which the vampires flock to in order to act upon their intense sexual arousal, where they are so consumed by the music and the atmosphere that they are oblivious to what's happening around them. Strangely, these nightclubs often pop up suddenly, and then a few weeks later close down just as suddenly, something that has caught the attention of the Flames, prompting them to send their agent to check out these clubs. The sudden opening and closing of the clubs is something that hasn't only been noticed by the Flames, however. According to a cassette tape dropped by one of the vampires, they too have noticed this unusual phenomenon, although they are just as confused by it. When the Reaper investigates these clubs, the only clue they find is a note in a safe that contains the address of the building, as well as the date sometime in the future. A club they investigate later on leads the Reaper to a vampire warehouse containing a huge amount of ash, which they clear out. But they're no closer to understanding where ash comes from or what it's going to be used for. So the Flames sends the Reaper to attack two high-ranking vampires of the 1,000-Year Royals. Amber, who was Roland's vampiric lover mentioned in his cassette tape, and Evelyn, her twin sister. Their standing in the gang should mean they should know something about ash, but the only information they give up comes from the dying words of one of the sisters. They mention something about a harvest. The words don't make any sense, until the Reaper is sent on their next mission. The Flames reports that one of the vampire's clubs has suddenly gone silent, and when the Reaper arrives, they find that while the building is quiet, it isn't empty. All of the partying vampires inside have been turned into statues of ash, revealing the dark secret of where the drug comes from and what it's made out of. What doesn't make sense though are the presence of other vampires that haven't been turned to ash in the nightclub. That is, until one of the night crawlers, a vampire that has a bat-like appearance, drops a cassette tape. Upon listening to the tape, the Reaper learns that the 1,000-Year Royals are starting these clubs and attracting other vampires to them with their alluring promise of dancing, drinks, music, and sex. Once a sufficient number of vampires frequent the establishment and give in to their sexual impulses, thus rendering them oblivious to their surroundings, they are forcibly converted into ash with the help of the skeletons, who use a strange magic to cause the conversion. The harvest Amber and Evelyn mentioned is the process of the 1,000-Year Royals collecting the ashy remains of the vampires that were transformed by the conversion, whereupon it was to be stored until enough could be gathered to be used in their plan to escape from this place. Apparently, the amount of ash that was required to set this plan into motion was huge, more than what the vampires themselves could guard, which is why the zombie kings were brought in to help protect the ash caches. Obviously not wanting the undead to leave this place, after all they belong here, not in the mortal world, the Flames aims to stop their plan to leave and sends the Reaper to pay a visit to Sir Stella, one of the royal leaders of the 1,000-Year Royals, to learn exactly how the vampires are being converted into ash. Yet as the Reaper arrives to Sir Stella's penthouse, they find that skeletons from the Dredged, together with their leader Ibzan, got here first, killed all of Sir Stella's guards, and, after congratulating him on a job well done, execute him in his bedroom. However, despite Sir Stella'S demise, all hope is not lost, as the Reaper, after clearing the building of the skeletons, manages to open a safe behind Sir Stella'S desk where they find documents explaining the harvesting process, how skeletons use magic totems installed within the nightclubs to turn the occupants into ash, and the location of the next nightclub to be hit. Knowing they need to stop the next harvest, the Reaper rushes to the nightclub and sprints from room to destroy the ash totems, knowing that if they take too long, the totems will go off and transform the building's occupants into ash. Thanks to the information they found in Sir Stella'S penthouse, the Reaper is able to successfully identify and destroy the totems, preventing the conversion and subsequent harvest. However, just because they stopped at this one, doesn't mean others can't take place. After all, the 1,000-Year Royals still have a number of nightclubs they could use for an ash harvest. So, to put an end to the machinations of the vampires and stop the conversions in the flow of ash, Madame Stella, the real leader of the 1,000-Year Royals, will need to be eliminated. It's a daunting task for the Reaper, as, just like Roland, Madame Stella has a number of guards posted around her huge home, is carrying powerful firearms, and knows of the Reaper's approach. And, to make matters worse for the Reaper, she has undergone a necromantic process that has split her soul into multiple containers called phylacteries, which are spread across her mansion. And so long as these are whole, Madame Stella will not die, as the power of these vessels will revive her if she is killed. But the Reaper isn't some pushover that can be frightened away. They are the embodiment of death, and using their powers, they are able to traverse the halls of the mansion, overcome Madame Stella's guards, destroy her scattered phylacteries, and kill the vampire, bringing an end to the 1,000-Year Royals. Just like Roland before her, Madame Stella drops a cassette tape upon her death, and when the Reaper listens to it, they learn more of the undead plot and Madame Stella's role in it. Similar to Roland, Madame Stella was a leader of the vampires. But unlike Roland, she wasn't driven by an altruistic desire to better the lives of the vampires. She was driven by a desire to improve her own life, regardless of what happened to anyone else. She detested her life in the place, of being surrounded by filthy undead and of being stuck in dreary, cold darkness, and would give nearly anything to get away from it. So when the Dredged came to her and said that they would be able to take her to a place where the sun could warm her skin, she jumped at the chance. That's when they explained what she would need to do, how she would need to help them convert hundreds of vampires into ash until they had enough that they could put their plan into motion. Whereas Roland agonized over his decision to send the zombies to die at the Reaper's hands, Madame Stella had no issues with sacrificing her own people if it gave her a chance to escape. After all, vampires were not strangers to betrayal. With her cooperation, the conspirators were able to accumulate the ash they needed, and now, they almost have enough to set the final stages of their plan into motion. To stop this plan from coming to fruition, the Reaper now has to turn their attention to the Dredged, and the one behind the whole conspiracy, their leader, Ibzan. When they return to the Flames, the entity gives them some information on their new targets. Namely, that skeletons are undead that are created when a mortal commits suicide. And as punishment for taking death into their own hands, their souls are forever trapped within the place, dooming them to a damnation where they are forced to wander in eternal purgatory. However, their longevity has apparently given them a lot of experience in subterfuge and concealment, as the Flames informs the Reaper that its information-gathering agents, the Candles, have noticed the skeletons gathered around the docks, but can't see what they're shipping. The Reaper is sent to find out what they're hiding, but all they find inside the shipping container is a manifest that mentions the skeletons are shipping bioorganic materials. But to what end remains a mystery. That is until their next mission, one that involves them clearing out a base the skeletons are trying to set up in a high-rise, where they pick up a cassette tape dropped by one of the skeletons. When they listen to the tape, they learn that in order to make their escape, the skeletons are building a portal, one that requires flesh to construct, revealing why the skeletons are interested in the materials mentioned in that manifest. The Reaper also learns that, as a result of being created with no skin or organs, the skeletons suffer from a deep, everlasting cold that chills them, literally to the bone, and that, coupled with the everlasting purgatory that comes with their divine punishment, makes their undead existence in the place a special kind of hell. That's what makes Ibzan's escape plan so enticing. The prospect of being free from the dark place and the awful chill that constantly pains them is so compelling that every skeleton has agreed to help him, despite any reservations they may have on how feasible the plan truly is. As the speaker ends the tape, they reveal that, just like the zombies and vampires, skeletons can't help but to continue to repeat the same thoughts and behaviors that led them to the place. But due to having no organs or nerves, they never actually die and reanimate like the others. The best they can do is rip themselves apart and leave themselves as a scattered pile of bones. But even if they do that, something called a general eventually comes along and reassembles them. The Reaper doesn't need to wait long to understand what that means, as the next time they talk to the Flames, the entity explains that generals, also known as liches, are skeletons that use a strange, unknown magic to reconstruct damaged skeletons back together again. The Reaper gets to see this in action in their very next mission, as generals are patrolling the halls of a couple of bars the Reaper is sent to clear, resurrecting any skeletons that they destroy. A cassette tape dropped by one of the beings implies that their necromantic power is linked with their skeletal punishment, as when a general resurrects a skeleton, the magic they use actually warms their body for a short time, offering a reprieve to the chill that constantly troubles them. That momentary warmth is what compels the generals to continually reanimate any crumbled skeletons they see, and thereby continue the punishment these undead are meant to suffer for eternity. Upon their next return at the flames, the Reaper learns that the candles have tracked down another one of the skeleton shipments, so they head to the location, clear out all the dredged guards, and open one of the containers to find it completely filled with the corpses of zombies and vampires. As they look over the gruesome scene, a few things come to the Reaper's mind. First, they're reminded of the comment they heard in that earlier cassette tape, the one that mentioned that the skeletons needed flesh for their portal. And suddenly, the Reaper understands just what the bioorganic materials really are, and what they're meant to be used for. Then, as they notice that the bodies in the container are overwhelmingly ones of zombies, they remember the order that Roland received from the vampires, the one where he was to continually send his men to die at the hands of the Reaper. And the Reaper realizes where the skeletons were receiving most of the bioorganic materials, and just how deep their treachery really runs. They never intended to take the zombies and the vampires to the land of warmth. They were just using them as pawns in their plans. The zombies were just a means of gathering flesh, and the vampires were simply a way of gathering ash. In a way, even the Reaper was being manipulated by the Dredged, as they were unwittingly creating a ton of bodies for the skeletons to collect and use for their portal. Upon hearing of this recent development, the Flames sends the Reaper to interrogate Timur, a high-ranking Dredged engineer that should have more intimate information on the group's plans. However, the Reaper doesn't actually talk to Timur, as the skeleton is highly paranoid, and as a result, has rigged his entire home with dangerous booby traps. Before the Reaper can enter Timur's room, they have to disarm one of these traps, which has the dual function of releasing explosives in the next room, which blow the skeleton apart and seemingly destroy any leads the Reaper can find. But a safe on the wall is spared from the damage of the explosions. Inside are some notes of Timur's that are disturbing. Apparently, Timur had been spying on a Reaper, and as he secretly watched the being soak in the warmth of the flames, Timur became convinced that by becoming a Reaper, he could finally be free of the cold that froze his bones. His first attempt at becoming a Reaper involved throwing himself within the fireplace, believing the immolation would burn his skeletal body away, whereupon he would rise as a Reaper. But as the fire died down, his skeletal body and its awful chill remained. However, Timur wasn't willing to give up, and seemingly continued his work to become a Reaper and feel the warmth of the flames. Until recent developments, that is. Amongst Timur's scattered notes, the Reaper finds some blueprints that confirm their suspicions. The skeletons are building a portal of flesh that they intend to use to travel to the mortal plane. Finally having confirmation of just how the Dredged are going to leave the place, the Flames now sends the Reaper to track down and stop them and their leader Ibzan, and begins the process by sending them to a local mechanic shop, where Ibzan is apparently getting his car serviced. If true, then Ibzan's address should be with his car, which should lead the Reaper to him. As the Reaper arrives at the garage, they find that Ibzan has apparently picked up on the fact that the Reaper and the Flames are hunting him down, as he's hired demons from the underworld to help in fighting them off. However, despite the firepower of the demons, the Reaper clears out the garage and gets Ibzan's address from his car. When they head to the address and clear out the building of more demon guards, the Reaper enters Ibzan's apartment to find it empty, and fairly sparse as well. The first thing they pass are a single table and chair sitting a good distance apart from one another, and between those pieces of furniture is what looks to be a roughly plastered up wall, as if something were quickly covered up. Past these on the far side of the room is a bed and some candles on the windowsill. Despite how empty the room is, the Reaper can't help but feel like it's familiar in some way. They shake off the feeling and open a safe on the wall where, just like in Timur's safe, they find some scattered notes of Ibzan's. There's a note that reveals Ibzan learned of the Reaper's pursuit by capturing and interrogating a candle. And there's another that indicates that Ibzan feels an incredible amount of remorse over some event from the past and wants to apologize to someone. But what that was and who that is a mystery. The Reaper also notices a small metal lighter in the safe, one that doesn't work anymore when they try to use it. They turn their attention back to the notes and find one Ibzan left for them, where, apparently confident in the demons he's hired, he reveals the location of the portal and dares the Reaper to try and stop him. However, the Reaper isn't in this alone, and the Flames, recognizing the odds their agent is up against, offers some of their candles to assist in eliminating the demon snipers that surround the old school building, clearing a way for the Reaper to reach the portal. But they're too late. As they arrive, they find the portal already activated, and watch as Ibzan and the Dredged head through it to reach the mortal plane. The Reaper clears out the demons that were left behind, and, with no other option, uses the leftover ash to restart the portal and chase after Ibzan. They find themselves in a wintry landscape, and pass through the snow to find a large house filled with candles. But other than that, the house is empty. The only other thing of note is a well outside, and when the Reaper stands by it, they sense they can go through it. They flick their lighter and descend down into a subterranean chamber gently lit with candles. As they walk through it, they come across candles the spies used by the Flames, bowing before a large, burned skeleton, sitting cross-legged in front of 4 fireplaces, with many candles on its legs, shoulders, and head. The figure calls to the Reaper in a familiar voice, and as the Reaper sits in the lounging chair next to the entity, a familiar warmth washes over them, and they realize this is the true form of their boss, the Flames, who has been speaking to them through their whole journey by linking one of the fireplaces in this chamber to the fireplace in the Reaper's apartment. The Flames tells the Reaper that Ibzan is here, but says that since they are not the god of death, they can't stop him, so asks the Reaper to take care of him. At that moment, Ibzan appears in the building above, looking to see and talk to his friend. The Reaper heads up and starts a showdown with the skeleton. It doesn't take long before the Reaper is able to cut him down, but when he does so, the Dredged leader warps to another location in the mansion, spawning skeletons to assist in battling the Reaper. Despite these constant reinforcements, despite Ibzan's confidence and firepower, the Reaper is able to beat him down. And as Ibzan kneels before the well, the Reaper executes him with a bullet through the head. The Reaper approaches Ibzan's still body, wondering who that friend of his could be, and why he would go through so much just to apologize to them, and then notices a cassette tape in the snow next to him. They pick it up and play it on one of the recorders in the mansion, where they hear Ibzan, disoriented, stumble into a room while suffering the awful chill of being a skeleton. He's come for something he believes could help warm his bones, something that he calls his friend. He's come looking for a fireplace. He was certain there was one in the room, but now there's only a blank, featureless wall, which sends him into a panic. He starts clawing at the wall in desperation, hoping that he can uncover the fireplace, that he can see his friend and feel his warmth. He eventually does reveal the fireplace, but is dismayed to find it empty and cold. A fate he is doomed to suffer for the rest of his unnatural existence. The realization that Ibzan knew of the fireplaces, and apparently of the Flames, which he referred to as his friend, makes the Reaper think back to Ibzan's sparse apartment, to the roughly plastered up wall, and suddenly, they realize what that wall was covering up. Then they remember the small object that was in Ibzan's safe, the metal lighter that no longer worked, which makes them think of their own metal lighter. Then they think of their ability to travel through the ventilation systems of the buildings they're in, how it's almost like a warp, similar to the ability they saw Ibzan use. Then they think of Ibzan's black blood, which is the same as theirs. Then of Ibzan's face, which did have skeletal features, but also ones not seen on any of the other dredged. Ones that were similar to the features of their own face. They think of how the Flames talked about Ibzan, about how he couldn't bring about his own end, about how the Flames couldn't forgive him. Eventually, the implications become too much to ignore, and the Reaper realizes the truth behind everything. Ibzan used to be a Reaper, one that, for whatever reason, chose to end his own life, thus becoming a skeleton. However, once he felt the consequences of that decision, the fierce cold he would be forced to endure for eternity, he immediately regretted it. Having known of the fireplace's warmth from his time as a Reaper, he attempted to return to the Flames, to apologize to his friend for his mistake, and beg them to warm him as they once did. But his suicide had angered the entity, and they refused to acknowledge him any longer. Since he was met with silence at every turn, Ibzan took matters into his own hands. He convinced the Dredged and the vampires and the zombies to cooperate with him by telling them of a land of warmth that will take their troubles away, when in reality, he was just trying to find a way to get to the physical form of the Flames so that he could finally talk to the entity and apologize. The Reaper's thoughts are only cemented further when they listen to a secret tape they find hidden amongst the trash outside the mansion. On the tape, they hear a Reaper complain about their duty and their existence, about the countless days of murder and mayhem, followed by long periods of darkness and loneliness as they lie on a bed that's useless to them in an empty apartment, waiting for their only friend, the Flames, who have no interest in holding a conversation or actually being friends, to offer something to break the boredom, which only begins the cycle anew. If this is what Ibzan's time as a Reaper was like, the Reaper understands why he would be so desperate to do anything to be free from it. As they make their way back to the Flames, reflecting on Ibzan's misery, wondering if they'll be forced to share the same fate, they realize that, unlike Ibzan, the Reaper had been given things to light up the darkness of their apartment and fight off the boredom they'd feel between missions. They were even given a cat so they had a companion and didn't feel so lonely as they waited to hear from their boss. Apparently, the Flames had recognized the mistakes they made with Ibzan, and learning from them, took steps to ensure their new Reaper didn't turn out the same way as their previous one. And there was still one final gift they were going to give their current Reaper to ensure history didn't repeat itself. When the Reaper returns to the Flames, the entity recognizes that their job is now complete, and instead of sending them back to the place to continue the endless cycle of murder and destruction, allows them to rest, a comfort they never offered Ibzan. Darkness takes the chamber, and the dim light of each candle is snuffed out as the game of Deadbolt comes to an end. At first glance, Deadbolt seems unremarkable, like just another pixel game where you go around and kill stuff. But just like the undead conspiracy in the game, there is more here than meets the eye, and as you delve deeper into the story and start to uncover the truth of everything, you find a great package underneath all the modesty that is incredibly compelling and continues to pull you deeper and deeper until you find yourself at the end only wanting more. It really goes to show that you can't judge a book, or in this case a video game, by its cover, as that simple, unassuming item could have an unforgettable experience that you'll remember forever. Hopefully, this video helped answer any outstanding questions you may have had on the game or the story, but if it hasn't, feel free to ask any that you still have and I'll do my best to answer them. But with that, I'm done here. So, thank you for watching and see you later. Deadbolt, why do I keep saying Deadbolt? Deadbolt, God damn it.